IVM.
Folks, welcome to Credit Smart with CIBIL. I'm your host Anupam Gupta, host of the Paisa Vaisa podcast. My guest, Sujata Ahlawat, Senior Vice President at TransUnion CIBIL. Sujata, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anupam.
Fantastic. So, we are doing myth busting again with credit score. Okay, so here we go. My first one is slightly funny, but guess what? Everybody thinks this, no? It is CIBIL, only CIBIL ruined my credit score. How true or false is that?
We've heard that so many times.
Do you have people in the lift in your building point at you because of you my credit score went down, मुझे credit card नहीं मिला, मुझे home loan नहीं
Our
मिला?
answer is you'll get a better interest rate, you'll get it faster, improve your CIBIL scores.
Okay, so how does this work?
Yes. So this is the biggest myth that we've heard, Anupam. So CIBIL doesn't ruin your credit history or rating. If you really look at what do we do, I think it's extremely important to understand what CIBIL does. We are a RBI regulated entity. So all the credit information, so all the information related to loans, credit cards, etc. are submitted to us, where we compile all the information for individuals and businesses. And basis that, a CIBIL score is generated. So banks and financial institutions use that to judge the credit worthiness of an individual. And of course, there are basic other checks that banks do, but CIBIL score is definitely important for you to get the right kind of offers, to get the right kind of loans. So CIBIL does not ruin your credit rating. I think the way to look at it is a high CIBIL score is a gateway to a lot of things that you could be worthy of. A new job, a loan, the car that you've dreamt of. It's important to take control of your rating. It's important to take control of your credit behavior. And I think everything else falls in place. So we help you build the right credit behavior. We help you get access to everything that you've dreamt of.
Do you give me access to a loan? Because that's my second myth. Apparently, people think that you offer loans and grant loans to the entire world. Are you an NBFC or a bank by any chance?
That's a funny one, but no, we don't. So, but we are key enablers to help you get the loan that you want. So, if you look from our perspective, our mission is to help consumers get faster and cheaper access to credit. So while we help banks improve and get the right kind of, bridging the gap between banks and the consumers to identify the right set of consumers. So as we call it, finding the good, funding the good. At the same time, we are shifting that power in hands of consumers as well, where a consumer can demand what he is eligible for and what he deserves. So I think that's the change that we've seen in the consumer behavior, where consumers can check their CIBIL score, a high score above 730. They can go back to the bank and demand a better interest rate or better processing fees. So clearly bridging the gap between banks and financial institutions and consumers, to create the right kind of ecosystem.
Yeah, folks, an important lesson in the first two myths. Number one, CIBIL does not ruin anything. Okay, they just maintain your score and they calculate your score and they offer it to anyone who's willing to, take it from you. And second, CIBIL does not offer any loans. They're not a bank or an NBFC. Shweta, do you guys also, I've had this from a lot of people. Do you delete reports? I mean, how does that, if that's even possible?
So, Anupam, it's like I mentioned, it's important to understand what CIBIL does. So we take all the information from the banks. They are mandated to submit to us. We cannot delete any kind of information from the report without the banks and financial institutions instructing us or guiding us. However, I do understand a lot of times consumer write to us that a certain information is not correct in my report. There could be, in terms of banks submitting some information, there could be some challenges. So we do enable and handhold consumers once they check the report to see, if there are any kind of discrepancies that they might see in the information. Consumers can reach out to financial institutions through us. We enable that. And basis the instructions, we are able to make the changes. But we cannot delete without the right instructions.
Yeah, one of my favorites, and this has actually happened with me, by the way. I shifted addresses. Okay, and when I checked my CIBIL score and my credit report, my old address was there. So I was like, ye kya ho gaya? So I was actually able to, I think it's called raise a dispute or raise a flag or whatever with CIBIL. And then you guys actually went and, changed it. So that is possible, right?
That's possible. So if there's some, if a bank comes back and saying that there's been some kind of misreporting from their part, it could be any reasons, we do help change that as well. We create a platform for help for consumers to, raise any kind of disputes that they might have.
Okay, fantastic. Next myth is also one of my favorite. It reminds me of me checking my weight. Okay, I check my weight every day. It's going to go down. It's going to go down. Nothing happens. Anyway, so what's it with checking my CIBIL score? Some people think that checking my CIBIL score will actually change it. So how does that work?
So, Anupam, it's like checking your weight, but it motivates. If you lose some weight, it motivates you to lose some more. But if you check your score regularly and goes up, it motivates you to improve further as well. So,
Nice.
but it's important to understand what kind of checking does impact, right? When an individual checks their own CIBIL score, it is basically to drive the right kind of credit consciousness. They're looking to monitor their credit profile, improve it. That will not impact the score because that's considered as a soft inquiry. I, as an individual, I'm responsible for my credit behavior. However, if the banks and financial institutions check the score for underwriting, where they're actually applying for a loan and they're checking your CIBIL score and report to underwrite or provide that loan to you, that gets recorded in your credit report as a hard inquiry, and too many of those inquiries do impact. So, in short, checking your own score, I mean, you are eligible for it. You should check your score regularly. You should check your profile regularly. Has absolutely no impact on the CIBIL score.
Okay. Next myth. As long as I pay my credit card bills on time, right, my CIBIL score will not be affected. I think this reminds me of the utilization ratio and stuff like that.
Yes.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Payment, no doubt, I think is the most important factor in maintaining a high CIBIL score. However, you rightly brought up, as I said, utilization plays a very, very important role. Right, as we start looking at what utilization is, just to recap, it is the amount of money that you're spending on the card to what has been sanctioned to you. So if you're maxing it out regularly, you are actually living on credit card, that is a negative trigger. So, a good utilization, say, is considered anything around 30% is considered to be good. You should not be maxing it out regularly. So, of course, paying back on time, definitely. But I think also what you need to maintain as a good habit is making sure you're not over leveraging yourself month on month, because someday it's going to balloon up. And a high utilization ratio might be considered negatively in the long run.
So I'm just going to add one point here from the previous episode on myths that we did, Sujata, which was that changing score takes time. Just remind our listeners about how does that work. Because again, what happens is that if I'm paying on time, or let's say I miss one payment, and from next payment onwards, I actually went back on time. It's not like button the bio credit score improve, okay, like we had said. Just remind our listeners again about that.
Yeah. So, Anupam, like I said, improving your score takes time, anywhere between 4 to 12 months, depending on how bad the outstanding was. So let's look at a scenario where, you've been paying regularly on time, you've been maxing out your credit limit, and unfortunately, 1 month, you're not able to pay the whole amount and you end up paying the minimum balance. There might be interest component that gets added in future months. So your outstanding keeps increasing. However, you've missed a month. That has a negative impact. So if you really look from a credit report standpoint, what you see in a report is your monthly days past due as well. And I think that's very important to consider. So even a small change will impact the score. And depending on how big the outstanding was, what was the utilization ratio, it may take anywhere between 4 to 12 months to get it back on track.
Folks, that's a reminder for you. Sure, the next one is just inquiring for loans does not impact my CIBIL score. I think so. What happens here is that let's say that I want to buy a motorcycle and I'm just fishing around, right? I'm probably going bank to bank, asking them that what's your interest rate, and I submit my details to them. Does that process of me inquiring about loans impact my score?
Only inquiries and inquiring too often does impact your score, Anupam. So let's look at from a standpoint of you already have a very, very good credit history. You've never defaulted. However, when you look from you're looking to buy a new house because you anyways have a good credit history, you would apply to a couple of places to get the right kind of interest rates. That might not impact as much. But if you've not had any kind of credit history or you've been declined in the past and you apply to too many places very, very quickly, that's a sign of you being credit hungry. That will definitely impact. So while I think we need to make sure that we are applying for the right kind of product, getting the right kind of offer from multiple banks, I think that credit hungry behavior needs to be in check as well.
Okay. The next one is very interesting because I like the sound of settled, right? So having a settled status on our CIBIL report has a positive connotation. So first, what is a settled status? I like the sound of it. Like settlement ho gaya, chalo, whatever, something must have happened. So A, what is settled status? And B, the impact on my CIBIL score or my credit score.
This is the biggest myth that I really want to bust because this is the one that hurts people the most as well when you start looking from a credit score and your reporting standpoint. So let's look at what are the three fields that might come in a report. So like I mentioned, the CIBIL report has details of all the accounts that you have taken or any kind of product that you've taken with all the details as well. So as you start looking at your outstanding, the three key fields that come into play here. So if you ever had a loan which you want to kind of close, so there'll either be a settled flag, there'll be a closed flag, or there'll be a write-off flag. Because, and we spoke about prepayment in the previous episode as well. Closed is when you've closed your loan completely, and that's a good prepayment that we spoke about. You've paid back all the outstanding, there's nothing due, not even an interest which a card might have, which is all good. So you're actually displaying a good credit behavior. Settled comes into play when, you have some outstanding, you've been kind of debating with the bank, you're not really agreeing to an outstanding. However, the bank says that, look, you pay me this much and I'll close this account for you. And this is, a lot of consumers are not aware of this. That gets tagged as a settled flag. Settled basically means you have not serviced your own loan completely and you have kind of missed some amount of payments, which will have an impact on your credit profile. So you've not serviced the entire loan. The third piece is where you have not settled, you've not paid anything. Banks write off that loan after 180 days of, reaching out to you. Your outstanding has been due for more than 180 days. Write-off is a complete negative flag. You are, I would say, a negative customer. You've taken a loan. You've not serviced anything. So hence, it's very, very important when you're looking to close a loan. And this especially happens with credit cards as well, where you're disputing an interest amount. And whenever you're talking to the bank, and if you think that's not right, you have to get it tagged as closed, not settled.
Yeah, this reminds me of an incident with a friend of mine. What had happened with her was that there was a very, very old credit card that she thought she had closed. Okay, and I think there was a rounding off error or something, maybe a 10 rupee amount. That was there 10 years ago. And as the years went by, that whole thing ballooned and then it came to a settled, to her actually reaching out to the bank, because what happened was that then she applied for a brand new credit card and she was rejected. And she was in a fairly senior position somewhere, and it's kind of jarring, right? Because you think that you will get that credit card and it's quite easy. And when she inquired why was they rejected, it was because of the score. When she investigated the score, it seems that because she settled, right? Because this was a very old. Is that how this works? I mean,
Absolutely. And I think, Anupam, when the settled flag comes in, there is also a days past due that gets added. So, it's a double whammy, right? You have a settled and you have an outstanding. So whenever, we encourage our consumers that whenever you are speaking to banks and whenever, you're trying to close an account, monitor your CIBIL score and report. You have an option to check what has it been reported as. If you do not agree, go back and change rather than waiting for you to take that next loan and getting a shock like this. So I think monitoring and taking control of your own credit profile is extremely important.
There you go, folks. That's some important tips on credit discipline. Okay, last one for this episode, and this, in fact, also happens to be, again, one of my favorites. Being a loan guarantor. Loan guarantor is always a tricky position because you're guaranteeing a loan for someone. And typically, I think this happens between family and friends. Someone's taking a loan and the bank says, give me get a guarantor from somewhere, and then you stand up and say, I'll be the guarantor for your loan. How does that impact my CIBIL score?
Yeah, it's there are many situations where we've seen, right? You really don't understand what a guarantor means. If I had to really put it legally, a guarantor is a co-applicant without any kind of beneficiary. So basically, you are taking the onus in case there's a default that happens on behalf of the applicant as well. So there's a separate tag which is created and it will show in your report as well that you have guaranteed a certain loan. And in case that a default happens on that loan, it will adversely impact your CIBIL score, not just of that individual, but yours too. So I think it's very, very important to be conscious about who you're guaranteeing for, what is the need. And of course, when you start looking at monitoring your credit profile, so we encourage it's not just the applicant, but the guarantor who needs to monitor their credit profile as well. So it definitely impacts if there's any kind of default that happens in the applicant's credit profile.
I'm going to slip in one of my own favorite questions out here. What about Yari Dosti wala loan? Does that get recorded somewhere in some register? I gave like 10,000 to a friend. He never gave it back to me. Oh, now uska credit score improve hua. Mera to paisa gaya waisa ke waisa hi. So anything there that unofficial loans to friends aren't counted in my credit score, right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And hence it's always advisable to take from the official sources, right?
I always say that a loan to a friend is as good as a donation, and you can't even claim income tax exemption on that. But folks, there you go. That is a wrap on this episode of Credit Smart with CIBIL. My guest, Sujata Ahlawat. Senior Vice President at TransUnion. CIBIL, Sujata, thank you so much for doing this for our listeners.
Thank you, Anupam, for having me here. I'm sure our listeners are slightly more credit smart from now on. And they monitor their profile.
Yeah, I definitely hope that. They've got a lot of tips to handle that now. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.